So, two broken T5 transmissions. The question was, how are we going to make the V6 version work behind a V8? But since we found out they're both broken, the question now is, which one do we rebuild? Well, that's where it gets a little bit complicated because the V6 version has a different output shaft as well as a different input shaft and some other pieces, but the biggest part is that although it does have a broken counter shaft and some chipped gears, it is assembled. So that means when we take it apart, we're gonna learn how to put it back together, whereas the V8 version is technically perfect for our application because it has the right bell housing, tail housing, main shaft, and input shaft. Other than the fact that this one is completely disassembled and it wasn't disassembled by me, so I don't know how things came apart. So yep, that means that with that shell, we got a box of parts, another box of parts, and the output shaft. So once again, that leaves a big question. Do we put this puzzle that somebody else took apart back together, or do we continue the disassembly on the V6 version while still making the conversions for it to work with the V8? I'm not gonna lie, I'm leaning a little bit more towards putting the V8 box back together, but I guess we won't know which is the best option until we take inventory of what we have for the V8 boxes, see what's missing, and see what we need. And in order to do this, I'm gonna set myself up with a nice little working station. Cool beans, now that the parts are laid out, we can see the jigsaw puzzle that we're dealing with here. We're working kind of backwards here because usually you take apart a transmission, note how it came apart, and then go in the reverse order to put it back together. But in this case, that first step was already done. So I think the best way to go about this is to identify all of these parts in order for us to know what they even are, what they do, and how to put them back together. On the left side, you will see that we have all of our gears, and I'll get into each one individually in a sec. Towards the center of the table, we have an assortment of synchros, and I do believe we have some extras because the rebuild kits only come with 2 of these, and I have 4 for some reason. Working our way down the table, we have an assortment of bearings and races, as well as these little keys down here. And right under that, we have the counter shaft, a couple snap ring spacers, roller bearings, and some miscellaneous parts. But let's get back to the gears. Let's start with the identification of all these gears and what they do, starting off with our first gear. Our first gear looks to be intact, a little bit dirty, but all of the teeth seem to have no major wear or cracks on it, as well as these teeth right here don't look too bad at all. First and second gear look pretty similar, but obviously there is a big size difference. They both have these 4 little circles on the ends right here. Again, they look fairly similar, and for some reason we have 2 second gears, but oh wow, that's cool to see. I just noticed something really cool in terms of wear patterns. So this right here is a brand new second gear. And as you can see, well, obviously there's no chips, no nothing going on, but these teeth right here, you can see that on the new gear, these teeth are fairly pointy and well pronounced. Whereas in the older second gear, you can see that the tips of them are a bit worn out already. So that was surely giving some issues with shifting into second, but second gear is pretty commonly abused the most. That could be due to hard shifting or downshifting into second. But if we take a side-by-side look at these, you can see how much more pronounced this newer gear has these teeth right here. And guys, please, if I make a mistake here, let me know down in the comments. This is my first time tearing apart a transmission and rebuilding one, so be easy, all right? Next up, we have gear numero 3, which is a little bit rusty. I know this box of parts was sitting for a while in a storage unit, so we have a little bit of surface rust that we might be able to get off later, but this is third gear. Third gear is going to have this conical shape right here, and obviously that fits directly onto one of the synchros. Can you take a wild guess and tell me where fourth gear is? Yeah, to my surprise too, it's on the input shaft. This right here is our fourth gear, again on the input shaft. This is the shorter V8 input shaft 10 spline. So quick recap, we have first gear, second gear, we have 2 of these, third gear, and fourth gear. Moving on to fifth gear, this is the assembly right here. You can see both of these spin perfectly together. This is the fifth gear assembly. Once you take a look at these, you can pretty much tell the difference and tell which gear is which. Now we move on to the sliders. These are what your shift fork is going to attach to, but this one with the gear on it is for the first and second gear choice, as well as the reverse gear right here. This second slider that doesn't have any gears around it is for the third and fourth, and this last one is the synchronizer or the slider for your reverse and fifth gear. So quick recap once again, we have first gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear, fifth gear, first and second slider, third and fourth synchronizer slider, and reverse and fifth synchronizer slider. And then we have our main shaft, which is going to house all of these clusters of everything that you see here. And if it sounds like I at least know 50% of what I'm talking about, it is thanks to the help of Andy Cruz, 505 Speed, and Eric the Car Guy. So let's take a look at the synchro assembly right here. It is a 3-piece assembly, and in the center of all 3 pieces we have this synchro. The newer ones are made out of a carbon material, but you can tell where these older ones are kind of this brownish, almost clutch like material. I believe it is like a clutch material. I mean, they're all kind of brake pads in their own way, but this gets sandwiched in here, and this piece also goes in here. And again, we have 4 of them. I think we only need 2, but we'll see once we get the rebuild kit. Same thing with these have the same brake pad clutch type material inside of it, which is the synchro. We have 2 of these bronze looking ones. They are for the reverse. We're only supposed to have 1, but for some reason we have 2. Moving along, we have some snap rings, as well as these little rings that hold all of the keys into the synchronizer. Then we have some of these spiral clips as well, more retaining rings, spacers, and needle bearings. Then we have these needle roller bearings, which are going to help spin along the shaft. And then we have our collar right here. You can see kind of how that works. An extra clutch fork for some reason, the shifter block assembly. This piece right here is the retainer for the counter shaft. That piece is sandwiched right behind this fifth gear right here. You can see it right here on the second transmission. It's right there. But if we take a look at the V8 transmission, we will see it has an upgraded steel one, which is a huge upgrade because these plates are known to stretch, and then throwing out the end play of that counter shaft. You can kind of see right here these sliders in action. As you can see, it slides back and forth, hence the name slider. So now that all of the parts have been identified, we know we have some extras, we know we might be missing something. So the V8 box again has a broken counter shaft inside, and we have a good counter shaft right here thanks to our friend Anthony. So let's get the old one out. Damn! Bringing out the big guns. Damn. And again, this little retaining plate is upgraded from the stock, and from what I've heard, it's one of the best upgrades you can do to the T5. I mean, I guess the cool thing about having 2 broken transmissions is I can use the V6 one as a reference and as an example to look at, even though it's broken, but it's assembled. We're gonna take note of the amount of shims that came off of this. In order to remove the counter shaft, we're gonna use this giant bearing splitter and make sure it's only on the bearing and not on the gears. We're gonna dust off old reliable and use the shop press. I think I might have to adjust these downwards a little bit. In she goes. Oh. No, yeah, in she goes. Now we're just gonna pump up the jam. I'm also gonna double check that we're not driving the counter shaft into anything else towards the bottom. Actually, I don't know why I put it facing that way. I'm gonna rotate a potato so I can actually look at it and know it's not hitting anything. She's going down pretty clean, pretty easy peasy. There it goes. Bearing is free, and the broken counter shaft is now free. So with the counter shaft now out of the way, we get a better view at all of this carnage and goo that's down here. It's just a bunch of metal pieces and chunks. I'm gonna put some degreaser in there, some parts cleaner, in order to loosen everything up. Cool beans. Now that the inside of our case is clean, you can see we're looking pretty spotless in here. I kept the reverse idler in there just because there's no point in removing it. It wasn't broken and we can build from here. I'm also gonna clean up all of this excess, what is it, silicone? RTV. A little bit of Scotch-Brite. So we're gonna use a little bit of mineral spirits to clean this up as well. This is just the gasket or sealing surfaces. I probably should have cleaned these first. But we're gonna put the box to the side for now. And we're gonna give the internals a good little bath because as you can see from the time that it was sitting in a storage unit, it has collected all kinds of dust and particles in between the teeth. So we're just gonna give them a light scrubbing. This kind of looks like coolant, but it's not, I promise. Yeah, you can already see what a difference that made. Clean gear. Third gear was probably the worst. Not only does it have some crud on it, but it also has a little bit of surface rust. So let's see if we could take that out. And I'm just using plastic bristle brush just so we won't be too aggressive. We might need to move up to one of the brass ones. And yes, I don't have an actual parts cleaner, one of those little cabinet sink things. It would be nice, but we're going a little ghetto today. That actually cleaned up way better than I expected. All of the surface rust kind of came off with that first plastic bristle brush. There's a little bit of pitting. I wouldn't really call it pitting, more staining than anything. But yeah, third gear looks good. Next up, this little mini one for fifth gear. Nice, nice. Also, in the last video where we found out both transmissions were broken, somebody had said that with all the time and money we put into trying to find a good one already, we could have already rebuilt the one that we had. And yes, you're right. But I just didn't want to rebuild it, all right? I'm not gonna lie, I was a little intimidated. Yes, we've rebuilt 2 engines before in the past, but manual transmissions and just transmissions in general have a crap ton of parts that it does get a little bit intimidating. First gear is looking good as well, and I'm using compressed air to blow these off. Pause. Now for the 1-2 slider. Wow, this really does look like coolant. I should have just told you guys it was coolant, so you guys can yell at me in the comments. Clean as a biscuit. 3-4 slider. It's like brushing your teeth in the morning. Except this degreaser would probably make your teeth fall off. All right, now this slider has a nice slide. So the reverse and fifth gear synchronizer is still assembled, so this would be a good time to understand how it's put together. If we take a really close look, you will see a ring that goes from this pin all the way to this pin right here, and that keeps the inside portion together. There's another one on this side. There's quite a bit of surface rust on this one, so we'll see if we can take that out. That pin, so this little ring comes out. This should be able to just pop out. And on the other side, you will see it kind of stayed together there. That's how it works. I doubt the plastic bristles are gonna take that surface rust out, but we'll see. All right, so the fifth and reverse slider are all clean. There's still tiny bit of signs of that surface rust, but I don't think it'll be an issue. As well as this one. So you can see it just goes in there like that. Now the main shaft could also use a little bit of love. Barely has any dust on it, so we're not gonna go too crazy. Now we wanna make sure we have a really clean shaft because it's important. It's what holds all of the gears, hence why it's called the main shaft. This is the base point. This is the foundation of the transmission. So again, we wanna make sure that this is very clean. Now this little doodad is super dirty, and as you can see, has quite a bit of corrosion on it. I'm almost tempted to use the one from the V6 transmission, but for sake of keeping all the parts with their corresponding transmission, we're just gonna clean it up. Not too shabby, at least that surface rust is gone. Cool, so we've cleaned up all of the parts that we will be reusing, which includes all 1 through 5 gears and reverse, the synchronizers, main shaft. The things that we did not clean are things that usually come in the rebuild kits, which are the synchros, bearings, spacers, and clips. From the recent conversations we've had with our friend Anthony and Andy Cruz, it looks like we might not need a full rebuild kit. Our synchros don't look that bad either. We have received tremendous help for this T5 rebuild from our friends Kevin Campbell, Michael Sanchez, Andy Cruz, the Catman, which most of those names you guys already know from our Patreon quarter. In the next T5 video, we will be doing the assembly, the rebuild of the T5 transmission. Well, with that being said, thank you guys for hanging out today. We'll see you on the next one.